Today's video has been made possible by the EA Creator Network. This video contains footage from a product in development and is not reflective of the final product. Things like gameplay, content, tuning, assets and player ratings may differ in FIFA 23. What's going on guys, NealGuides here. Welcome back to another video. Now in today's video we're going to go over right stick switching, and there's been some new changes in FIFA 23, and that is a new feature called adaptive player switching. What that means is, depending whether you're using ball relative or using player relative, you can hold the right analog stick for a longer duration and pinpoint the exact player that you want. This is perfect, for example, in situations where you want to select someone that's far away from the ball, but it's otherwise hard to do so with a general classic system. So I'm going to explain to you how the adaptive works, how to make use of it, and why it's better than a contemporary classic version. So one of the settings that they do have is the player rotation. This is another one that's not really used that much, and this is by flicking the right analog stick. It won't switch player for you, but you press the L1 button to confirm it. So let me show you a live example of it here. So you can see when I flick my right analog stick, I get a little white mark above the player's head, and then I just press the L1 button to confirm that's the person I want to switch to. Now why I wouldn't recommend this system, because it just takes too long. By the time you actually go to the player you want to switch to, press the L1 button to lock it in, the gameplay will change. It doesn't really work in a realistic example. You can see with a little bit of a slow-mo, you can see even to select the right player, it is quite difficult. So this is one thing I wanted to kind of briefly go over. Okay, now this is ball relative player switching. Now as you can see, if I pause it here, the ball is the reference point. And because the ball is the reference point, I can then flick the right analog stick to any of the players that I want to switch to. So you can see if I highlight the ball for a second and I draw a line to the next player I want to switch to, I flick my right analog stick in that same direction and you can select that player. If I want to select a player behind that, I just keep flicking the right analog stick to the left hand side, and that's why I like it, because it's very effective. You know, it's very systematic because you choose the player that's closest to the ball first, and generally speaking, the ball always moves in. The ball reference point and the player switching reference point is the same, because the ball moves at the same time, and you can always track the ball with your eyes, and therefore player switching, it's easier. That's the classic system. Now this is an example using player relative using the classic system, and it depends on the red marker. So you can see the red marker is above this player's head. If I then wanted to switch the ball, let's say technically to the center mid, I then have to flick the right analog stick to the left hand side, as you can see. And then once I've chosen that player, if I want to then switch to someone else, the reference point is now where the red marker is. So let's say, for example, here in this situation, I want to then switch to the left winger, which is Vinicius Jr., and then I have to flick the right analog stick to the right hand side, as you can see. And that means the reference point is always changing. You can see it's always changing, and that's why, although it's very good for pressing, for some players they find it difficult to follow along, and that's why I always recommend ball relative first, even though player relative is a default actual function. The only downside with ball relative before is you couldn't choose someone that was far away. Well, now you can. Now if we go into the settings, I'm going to show you ball relative with adaptive. Now basically, the longer you hold the right analog stick, the further along the player you can choose. And the reason why this is actually very good is because you now have a visual aid. Have a look at this. So you can hold the right analog stick and you get this line that shows you who you want to switch to. And it's like player rotation, but it's much more quick and effective. You basically just hold the right analog stick, choose a player, and then let go, and you will choose that player. So for example here, if I want to choose the left back, which is really far away, I hold the right analog stick in the left position to top left. You can see the line gets drawn, and then I just release it once that mark is above his head, and this way you can switch. Now you can still flick. It doesn't mean you have to hold it every single time. You can still flick to choose to a player very quickly, as you can see, but the benefit is you can choose someone that is much further away, whereas that was an issue last year. And then we have player relative adaptive controls as well, and it's the exact same thing, which is very similar to ball relative, is that basically you can now select any player you want. Now as you can see, the marker, the line which gets drawn, is dependent on which player is already selected. Now my best advice is, when you get the game, try right stick switching, the adaptive feature, depending on whichever one you use, whether you use player relative or use ball relative. use the adaptive feature, because as you can see from some of this gameplay, you can see how the game kind of draws the lines, who you can switch to, etc, etc. So it's a good way of learning. The reason why I like the adaptive one this year, especially for ball relative, is because last year there were some players on opposite side of the pitch you couldn't switch to. However, now that's been fixed. So in my opinion, ball relative is completely superior than player relative, because that was the only downside of it. But now since they fixed that, this is an easy solution, and you can see it's very, very easy. Just give it a go with the practice. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Just wanted to quickly go over the classic player relative and ball relative, and adaptive, the new adaptive ball relative and player relative. I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to give you a bit of a grasp of how player switching works, and I'll just say just give it a try when the game comes out. Don't forget, with adaptive you kind of draw a line and then you can switch to that player.